Alright, I wanted to do a hopefully quick video on something that you really need to know about if you use Power Apps and SharePoint or SharePoint data sources in Power Apps. In particular, if you want to filter any data in your app on user, or I should say person, columns in SharePoint. So in Power Apps, if you've used it for any amount of time, you're probably familiar with the user function. So user parenthesis dot email gives you the what they're calling the email of the currently signed in user, and user dot full name gives you the full name of the currently signed in user. However, it's really important to note that these are not necessarily the same as the user's email address in Microsoft 365 in their Active Directory profile, or the display name that goes with that account. So in this example, I have a user here, Robert Hogan, and this is just a simple app where I'm showing on the left-hand side, we've got the what is returned by the user dot email function. So it's rhogan at echobase blah blah blah, and then user dot full name is Robert Hogan. Now, in reality, when I in the user's record in Active Directory or Entra or whatever it's called these days, their email address might be different. So in this case, I actually have, he wanted, rather than his initial and his last name, he wanted his first name dot last name as his email, and he's one of the higher ups here, so we let him have that. Now the problem becomes that when you're using this user.email in Power Apps, thinking that's their email address, it's really not. It's actually something called their user principal name. I kind of wish that Microsoft had, the Power Platform team or Power Apps team, whoever came up with this convention, had the foresight to use the proper terminology and called this user.principal name or user.upn or something other than email. Now, Microsoft, the guidance from Microsoft is that the UPN and the email address should be the same. Emphasis on should, and that does make your life a lot simpler. But the reality of the situation is that you're going to have people, you're going to have situations, you're going to have users in your environment who want a different email address. Maybe their user, the UPN that they're assigned based on the naming convention that your organization uses, results in an email address that they don't like, or that is unprofessional for whatever reason. So you may not be able to make an exception on that UPN, but you can give them a different email address. So as an example here, Robert's, in his Active Directory record, we've set the email to robert.hogan and the display name to be Hogan, Robert, because he liked that format better. Now, again, that is contrary to the convention of the rest of the organization, but so it is an exception. But that's always where you're going to, not always, but the vast majority that you have problems with data in Power Apps and Power Automate, etc., it's when there are exceptions to your rules, to your conventions. So just case in point here, we have a list, a departments list in one of our sites, and the departments are management, operations, and research, and each has a particular person to which tasks are assigned. So when there is a management task, it is always assigned to Robert Hogan. If there's an operations task, it's always assigned to Peter Newkirk. Now, if in theory in my app, if I wanted to filter this so that Robert only saw his own entries here, the normal way, the way most people would approach that is to go to the, where is it, items property here. So the items is just departments, it's the whole list. But I want to filter this. I want to filter departments to ones where the task assignee dot email is equal to user dot email. So what we end up with is nothing, because the email address that's in that record, Robert Hogan, does not match the email address or the UPN that's being returned by the user function. So there are a few ways around this. You can, in your app, you can actually use the Office 365 users connector and basically get their user profile record and put that into a record variable. So just as an example of how we might do that, if I go to our app and on start, I may do set var user profile Office 365 users dot user profile, and here I can give it, what it's looking for is the user principal name, which we now know that user.email gives us that. So we can say user.email so that is that. So now if we run that app on start and then we look at our variables, we will see that we have our user profile, and if I look in this, if I view that record, we can see there he is, there's the account enabled, there's display name, there is, come on, where's the, so there's the display name, there is the job title, there is the mail. So we can see that it's not called email, it's called mail here. Just one saving grace here is that it does differentiate. So it's not just email everywhere. In the Office 365 user record, it is mail. But the important thing here is that since we are getting the UPN, or we're using that, we can say in that filter, instead of saying user.email, we can say var user profile dot mail, and there we go. So that's one way around it, is to basically store the user profile on app launch into a record variable and then reference that. So in other words, instead of anywhere you would say user.email, you'll use var user profile.mail. There's another option, which is a little bit of a hack, but it is simpler if you want to avoid using the Office 365 users connector for some reason. One of the other options is to basically set another variable, and I'm going to call var user claims. Now in the SharePoint realm, there is this thing called claims, which is basically the UPN with a bunch of stuff in front of it. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here and collapse this, and we're going to go into this gallery and edit that field so that I want the subtitle to be task assignee claims, just so that I can get the format, because I can honestly never remember it. So basically it's this I:0 £.f pipe membership pipe UPN. So basically what we do is set this var user claims, come on, to be I:0 £.f pipe membership. Now if you're using Microsoft 365 SharePoint Online, this will be consistent. So this will be the way this claims is represented will be the same everywhere in your within your organization, within SharePoint Online. If you are using on-premise SharePoint, depending on how it's configured, the claims string might be a little bit different. So just be aware of that. So now we have this var user claims, and again, if we take a look, if we run our app on start and go look at our variables again, there's var user claims, and we can see that that is all that. So now I can in here, instead of using var user profile.email, I could say var user claims, but that's obviously not going to match the email, but it will match the claims value. Now, technically speaking, this is not delegable. So that is something to keep in mind. In other words, if the list that you're reading from is going to be larger than 500 items, and honestly, if it's going to be more than a handful of them, for performance reasons, you really want to go with a delegable solution. This is not going to be, because essentially it's the only delegable properties when filtering on person columns are display names, which are not guaranteed to be unique, and the email address. So if you are filtering a large list, then the previous solution of using the Office 365 users connector and basically saving that profile into a variable in your app, that's going to be a better solution overall than using the claims. But use whichever one is going to make sense for you.